My mother-in-law raised her wine glass, and the whole room went quiet for her. She smiled the way people do when they know they hold the power, and she said, "Let's be honest. We all knew Valentina's side of the family was going to be a little different." Her father showed up in a borrowed suit. Bless his heart. The groom's side laughed. Not all of them, but enough. I looked across the table at my father, Ramon. He sat perfectly still, fork hovering over his plate, smile frozen on his face. The smile of a man who has survived too much to crumble in public. Then I looked at my husband. He was already looking away. That silence told me everything I needed to know. In that moment, I made a decision. And before this night was over, every single person in that room would know exactly who my father was, and exactly who they were. My name is Valentina Cruz. I'm 31 years old and I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Antonio, Texas. Me, my dad, and a window unit AC that only worked half the time. I'm a licensed occupational therapist at a mid-sized rehabilitation clinic. It's not flashy work, but it's meaningful, and I fought hard to earn every part of it. I help people relearn how to hold a fork, how to button a shirt, how to reclaim the small dignities that illness or injury tried to take from them. I chose that work on purpose. I think I always knew why. My father, Ramon, is the emotional center of my life. He's a Mexican-American immigrant who worked overnight warehouse shifts for over a decade to put me through school. He never complained, he never asked for credit, he just showed up every single night and made sure I didn't have to worry about anything except becoming something. My in-laws had a lake house, a country club membership, and an opinion about everything. My dad had calloused hands and a laugh that filled every room he walked into. I knew which one I'd rather have. I married into a family that always made me feel like a guest, tolerated, never welcomed. I told myself it would get better. I told myself Derek saw it and would handle it. I told myself a lot of things. I tried to keep the peace. I tried for 3 years. But the night they humiliated my father at my own wedding, that was the last time I tried. Valentina just told you she grew up with very little, but she had a father who gave everything. If that hit close to home, you're exactly who this story is for. Have you ever had to stay quiet while someone talked down to the person you love most? Keep watching, because Valentina didn't stay quiet forever. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And if you already know where this is going, tap like before we even get there. 3 weeks before the wedding, Diane called a family meeting. I wasn't invited. I found out about it the way I found out about a lot of things in that family. Through Derek, nervously, in fragments, over dinner. The meeting had been about the wedding program. Diane had taken it upon herself to redesign it. And somewhere in that redesign, my father's name disappeared. The father of the bride listing was gone, replaced by a generic acknowledgement line buried at the bottom of the page. Just like that. Like he was a footnote. Derek told me with his eyes already apologizing before his mouth opened. She just thought it would look cleaner, more streamlined. She wasn't trying to. It wasn't personal, Val. I looked at him for a long moment. She erased my father's name from my wedding program and it wasn't personal? I went to Diane directly. She didn't apologize. She explained, with a patient smile, that I had grown to understand meant the conversation was already over in her mind, that the aesthetic vision mattered and that Ramon wouldn't even notice. Honestly. Then I found out about the table. Diane had quietly contacted the seating coordinator and moved Ramon's table, originally front left, beside the wedding party, where father of the bride belongs, to a back corner near the catering station. She cited flow issues. I fixed both changes myself. I didn't say a word to Diane. I absorbed it. I stored it. The night of the rehearsal dinner, she gave a toast praising Derek's late grandfather for building character in the family. Then she laughed softly and added, "We just hope that character is contagious." The table laughed. Derek laughed. Ramon didn't catch the implication. His English isn't perfect, and in that moment, somehow that made it so much worse to witness. I sat there and smiled through it all. I let them think I didn't catch it either. That was my first mistake, letting them believe I was that easy to fool. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Diane organized a private brunch for the family to finalize the ceremony order. My mother passed when I was 12. Ramon was supposed to be my family representative at that table. He wasn't invited. I wasn't either. I found out when Derek mentioned it over dinner like it was nothing. Oh, it was just low-key, Mom, Aunt Bev, Derek's cousins, just ironing out the ceremony order. The ceremony order. For my wedding. Settled without me or my father in the room. I called Diane. Her voice was warm, practiced, perfectly calibrated. "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't think you'd want to deal with the logistics. And your father? I wasn't sure he'd be comfortable, with the language barrier." Polished cruelty, wrapped in concern. She had perfected it. At the wedding itself, during cocktail hour, Diane pulled me aside and complimented my dress. "You look beautiful," she said. "I was worried you'd want something too. Colorful. You know how your family does things." My maid of honor, my cousin Priya, was standing close enough to hear it. She grabbed my arm. "Tell me you're not going to let that go." "Not yet," I said. Across the room, Derek's brother had pulled Ramon into a loud conversation about immigration, framing my father's entire life story as something exotic and strange. "So, did you actually cross the border?" Or, before my other cousin stepped in and firmly shut it down. Ramon, dignified as always, excused himself to get some water. I watched him walk away and felt something harden quietly inside my chest. The final cut came from Derek's cousin, a woman named Lena, who told me what Diane had been saying for months, that I was lovely but not quite what we pictured for Derek. And worse, Diane had whispered to Derek's grandmother that Ramon had a drinking problem. Completely fabricated. An invented story to explain why he'd seemed tired at the rehearsal dinner. Tired because he'd worked a double shift the night before to pay for my wedding gift. I wasn't going to fight her. I was going to expose her. In front of every person she had ever performed for. What they didn't know was that I'd been paying attention long before the wedding. I saved things. Voicemails. Screenshots. A particular email Diane sent Derek 6 months before the wedding that he forgot to close on the shared laptop. I didn't reveal what was in it yet, only that it contained Diane's unfiltered opinion of Ramon, of me, and of what she believed this marriage would cost the family image. Her exact words, typed out in her own voice, sent from her own account. I had also saved a voicemail Diane left for Derek's aunt. She called my father that man, not Ramon, not Valentina's dad, that man. And she said it like it tasted bad in her mouth. I had printed that email. I had the voicemail saved in 2 places. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting for the right room, the right moment, and the right audience. And Diane had just handed me all 3. She wanted to make an announcement. So did I. Lena found me in the bridal suite 20 minutes before the reception began. She was the family's unofficial outsider, someone Diane had never fully accepted, someone who had been quietly sidelined for years after marrying a man Diane didn't approve of. She closed the door behind her and looked at me with the steady eyes of someone who already knew the shape of the story. "She did the same thing to me at my wedding," Lena said. Different words, same performance. I just didn't have anything on her back then. I showed her the email on my phone. She read it in silence. When she looked up, she didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You need to read that out loud tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight." Lena became my quiet coordinator. She made sure the microphone would stay on. She made sure Derek's grandmother, the true family matriarch, was seated front and center. She positioned herself where she could see Diane's face clearly when the moment came. Back in the reception hall, the energy was shifting. Diane had given her toast. The borrowed suit, the laughter, all of it, and she was growing more comfortable by the hour. She was moving table to table, performing generosity loudly, already talking about next Christmas and integrating the families properly. I went to check on Ramon. He was sitting quietly, his meal finished. "Mija," he said. "I've been underestimated my whole life. I don't need them to see me." Then, softer, looking at his hands, "But I think you need them too." Something unlocked in me when he said that. I watched Diane work the room, laughing a little louder each time, settling deeper into her own confidence. I stayed calm. The more comfortable she got, the better my timing would be. The DJ faded the music for open mic toasts. Derek's best man went first, then an aunt. Then Diane stood again, unprompted, to offer just one more little thought. She told a story about Derek's childhood, about family legacy, about what she hoped this marriage would grow into. Polished, warm, performed. When the applause faded, I stood up. The room settled into the quiet of expectation. A bride's toast. Sweet, probably short. Derek smiled at me from across the table. Relieved, I think. Believing I was ready to let the night move forward. I began warm. "I want to take a moment to talk about legacy, because that word kept coming up tonight, and I think it deserves a real definition." I looked directly at my father. My father worked the overnight shift at a distribution warehouse for 11 years. He made my school lunches before he left at 10 p.m., so they'd be ready when I woke up at 6 a.m. He learned English from library books because night classes conflicted with my soccer schedule. That is legacy. The room went quiet in a different way. Ramon looked down at his hands. Then I shifted. My voice stayed level. I also want to address something, because a few people at this wedding seem confused about what kind of family they married into, and I want to clear that up. I read from my phone, calmly, clearly, Diane's own words, that Ramon was an embarrassment risk, that I was charming but not polished, that Derek was making a romantic decision, not a strategic one. The room went completely still. I could hear the sound of ice settling in someone's glass across the hall. "Valentina, this is not the place," Diane started. "You made it the place when you moved my father's table to the corner of the room. You made it the place when you took his name off my program. You made it the place when you told people he had a drinking problem, a man who doesn't drink." At the front of the room, Derek's grandmother set down her glass. She looked at Diane with an expression Lena would later describe as 30 years of suspicion confirmed in 10 seconds. I finished. My father didn't need a lake house or a country club to raise someone worth loving, and I didn't need your approval to know that. I just needed tonight. I set down the mic. I walked to Ramon. He stood and pulled me into a hug without saying a word. And then, slowly, from different corners of the room, people began to clap. The reception ended with a fracture that everyone felt but no one named out loud. Diane left early with Derek's father. No goodbye to me. No goodbye to Ramon. Derek found me near the exit. He looked conflicted, tired, caught between two things he didn't know how to hold at once. "You could have talked to me first. You could have come to me." I held his gaze. "I did, Derek. 3 weeks ago, when she removed my father's name. You said it wasn't personal." He didn't have an answer for that. In the days that followed, Derek's grandmother called me. Not Derek, me. It was the first time she had ever done that. Her voice was unhurried, plain. "Your father raised you right," she said. "I should have seen it sooner." Lena sent a voice note the next morning. "She's not speaking to me either now. Best thing that's ever happened." Diane did not apologize, not formally. Weeks later, she sent a brief text citing stress and wedding emotions. I read it once. I didn't respond. Ramon never brought up that night on his own. But the following Father's Day, he gave me a card with 5 words written in his careful handwriting. "You didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you're mine." Valentina and Derek began couples counseling. Where it leads, she doesn't yet know. And she doesn't pretend otherwise. I didn't do what I did to save my marriage. I did it to stop pretending my father was something to be ashamed of. Some silences protect you. But some silences just protect the people who should have to answer for what they did. If you've ever sat at a table where someone you love was being quietly looked down on, and you said nothing because you were trying to keep the peace, this story is for you. Valentina kept the peace for 3 years. She learned that some peace isn't worth the price. Have you ever had to defend someone you love in front of people who thought they were better? Drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if Valentina's father reminded you of someone in your own life, click like to help this story reach others who need it. Every week, we tell stories about the moment someone finally stopped shrinking themselves for people who never deserved that kind of space. Valentina didn't walk out of that reception broken. She walked out knowing, maybe for the first time, that she never had to choose between her family and her dignity. If you found this story tonight, it probably wasn't an accident. Subscribe so the next one finds you too. And before you go, take 3 seconds, tap that like button, and share this with one person who's still sitting at that table, still staying quiet, still waiting for the right moment. Their moment might be closer than they think.